Okay, so tonight we're going to look at I Am That by Nisargadatta. And I'll begin. Most of you are already very familiar with his writings. So let me just begin. The questioner, this is question and answer. The question says to him, I see you sitting in your son's house, waiting for lunch to be served. And I wonder whether the content of your consciousness is similar to mine, or partly different, or totally different. Are you hungry and thirsty as I am, waiting rather impatiently for the meals to be served? Or are you in an altogether different state of mind? Nisargadatta answers, and I'm just going right into the heart of it. He says, I am like a cinema screen, clear and empty. The pictures pass over it and disappear, leaving it as clear and empty as before. In no way is the screen affected by the pictures, nor are the pictures affected by the screen. The screen intercepts and reflects the pictures. It does not shape them. It has nothing to do with the rolls of film. These are as they are, lumps of destiny, but not my destiny, the destinies of the people on the screen. And what about you? Do you shape your life, or are you shaped by it? The questioner says, yes, you're right. A life story unrolls itself, of which I am one of the actors. I have no being outside it, and it has no being without me. I am merely a character, not a person. Nissa says, the character will become a person when he begins to shape his life instead of accepting it as it comes and identifying himself with it. Questioner. When I ask a question and you answer, what exactly happens? Nisargadatta. The question and the answer both appear on the screen. The lips move, the body speaks, and again, the screen is clear and empty. When you say clear and empty, what do you mean? I mean free of all contents. To myself, I am neither perceivable nor conceivable. There is nothing I can point out and say, this I am. You identify yourself with everything so easily. I find it impossible. The feeling I am not this or that, nor is anything mine, is so strong in me that as soon as a thing or a thought appears, there comes at once the sense, this I am not. Well, do you mean to say that you spend your time repeating, this I am not, that I am not? Oh, well, of course not. I am merely verbalizing for your sake. By the grace of my guru, I have realized once and for good that I am neither object nor subject, and I do not need to remind myself all the time. I find it hard to grasp what exactly do you mean by saying that you are neither the object nor the subject. At this very moment, as we talk, am I not the object of your experience and you the subject? Nisargadatta. Look, my thumb touches my forefinger. Both touch and are touched. When my attention is on the thumb is the feeler and the forefinger the self. Shift the focus of attention and the relationship is reversed. I find that somehow, by shifting the focus of attention, I become the very thing I look at and experience the kind of consciousness it has. I become the inner witness of the thing. I call this capacity of entering other local points of consciousness love. You may give it any name you like. Love says, I am everything. Wisdom says, I am nothing. And between the two, my life flows. Since at any point of time and space, I can be both the subject and the object of experience, I express it by saying that I am both and neither and beyond both. Questioner, you make all these extraordinary statements about yourself. What makes you say those things? What do you mean by saying that you are beyond space and time? Nisargadatta, you ask and the answer comes. I watch myself. I watch the answer and see no contradiction. It is clear to me that I am telling you the truth. It is all very simple. Only you must trust me that I mean what I say, that I am quite serious. As I told you already, my guru showed me my true nature and the true nature of the world. Having realized that I am one with and yet beyond the world, I became free from all desire and fear. I did not reason out that I should be free. I found myself free, unexpectedly, without the least effort. This freedom from desire and fear remained with me since then. Another thing I noticed was that I do not need to make an effort. The deed follows the thought without delay and friction. I have also found that thoughts become self-fulfilling. Things would fall in place smoothly and rightly. The main change was in the mind. It became motionless and silent, responding quickly, but not perpetuating the response. Spontaneity became a way of life. The real became natural, and the natural became real. And above all, infinite affection, love, dark and quiet, radiating in all directions, embracing all, making all interesting and beautiful, significant and auspicious. Questioner, well, the universe does not seem a happy place to live in. Why is there so much suffering? Pain is physical. Suffering is mental. Beyond the mind, there is no suffering. Pain is merely a signal that the body is in danger and requires attention. Similarly, suffering warns us that the structure of memories and habits, which we call the person, is threatened by loss or change. Pain is essential for the survival of the body, but none compels you to suffer. Suffering is due entirely to clinging or resisting. It is a sign of our unwillingness to move on, to flow with life. Don't anticipate and don't regret, and there will be no pain. It is memory and imagination that cause suffering. Watch your mind with great diligence, for there lies your bondage and also the key to freedom. When the mind takes over, remembers and anticipates, it exaggerates, it distorts, it overlooks. As a sane life is free of pain, so is a saintly life free from suffering. Question, and nobody has suffered more than saints. Nisargadatta, did they tell you, or do you say so on your own? The essence of saintliness is total acceptance of the present moment, harmony with things as they happen. A saint does not want things to be different from what they are. He knows that considering all factors, they are unavoidable. He is friendly with the inevitable and therefore does not suffer. Pain he may know, but it doesn't shatter him. If he can, he does the needful to restore the lost balance, or he lets things take their course. Questioner, he may die. Nisargadatta, so what? What does he gain by living on? And what does he lose by dying? What was born must die. What was never born cannot die. It all depends on what he takes himself to be. Questioner, well, imagine you fall mortally ill. Would you not regret and resent? Nisargadatta, I am dead already, or rather, neither alive nor dead. You see my body behaving the habitual way and draw your own conclusions. You will not admit that your conclusions bind nobody but you. Do see that the image you have of me may be altogether wrong. Your image of yourself is wrong too, but that's your problem. But you need not create problems for me and then ask me to solve them. I am neither creating problems nor solving them. Just one other quick sentence from Nisargadatta. Awareness comes from the Supreme and pervades the inner self. The so-called outer self is only that part of one's being of which one is not aware. One may be conscious, for every being is conscious, but one is not aware. What is included in awareness becomes the inner and partakes of the inner. You may put it differently. The body defines the outer self, consciousness the inner, and in pure awareness, the supreme is contacted. Any comments, any questions?
Yeah, Evie.
Yeah.
Yeah, he talks about he can see this awareness or non-duality by shifting his focus of attention
Yes.
so that he can become the very thing he looks at and
Yeah.
experience that consciousness. Any
Yes.
tips on how to do that?
Well, don't forget, he's talking free of a me. There's no me here. And he's, as he says, love says, I am everything. There's no longer a separation. There's no longer a separate self. And wisdom says, I am nothing. I am no thing. So there again, I'm everything, and everything is me. There's no different, but there is no me. So there, fundamentally, there's no separation here. And you know, you don't, I don't know if you know, but he repeats again and again in the book that first one must release oneself of the obstacles that blind one to one's true nature, that blind one to pure awareness, choiceless awareness, ultimate awareness. So in this little paragraph, he's speaking now from the freedom of the person. He is no longer the person, a person.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that it always comes back to that freedom from this small self. And he said, watching, he watches. That's what he said here. I watch. So he's always the witness. And he's really asking us to do the same, to stay as witness.
I have some tips for you, Bill.
Sure.
Do you like music?
Oh, absolutely.
So have you ever listened to a piece of music where you're just getting into it and you just totally, you kind of lose yourself. You lose the sense of a separate self or personality or egoic self, right?
Yep.
So that's what's happening, because what's happened is you shifted your attention into this thing, this music, and the music is basically leading you along the way. And so you've let go of that notion of who you are, and you totally release yourself into that. And that's the same thing that we can do with basically anything, anything that we release the notion of who we are, of that egoic self, and we totally focus our attention on whatever it is, music, art, sunset, those things. And I think I might have told you, I had that experience where I was looking at something and then I just became that thing. And it was the most amazing thing about the experience was the recognition that it's totally available to us all the time. The only reason that we're not doing it is because we have this idea that, we're circumvented or circumscribed by a body or a
Mm,
personality.
mm,
But that listening to music or seeing work of art or listening to some of these guru guys talk, all those things are a practice in that relinquishing of that small identification and the experiencing of something else, which whether it's music or something, or in this case his thumb or his
mm,
other finger or whatever they are. It was very interesting when he was talking about that, right? Because he
mhm.
was talking about the thumb, and then I forgot his index finger,
The forefinger.
forefinger.
Finger.
Yeah. When he's thinking about it from the thumb's perspective, he's the thumb. When he's thinking about it, so it's just that, and so we have that ability. We just most of us never really give it a shot, because we have these
Mm,
circumscribed notions of who we are.
that's
So
right.
just let that go, and then like I said, music or whatever else you want to try.
Right.
Thanks,
Right.
Chip.
You're welcome.
Mhm.
I'll back that up with Walter. I'll second that. I just a little while ago had an experience for a little bit like that. I was watching a little bit of Funny Girl,
Ah,
Barbara Streisand movie, and the last song that she sings, My Man, she really did a rendition of that. And I was walking around, and all of a sudden I found myself standing in front of the TV. And there was no me, there was no I, there was just listening.
right.
I love that musical, Ugo. Also,
Yep.
she's
Yeah.
awesome, Barbara
Yeah.
Streisand.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not a Barbara Streisand fan, but she's got a voice, and that song was just out of sight. I mean, it's theatrically produced, but it's the voice too,
Right.
and it can be that way. I'm very much affected by music. I love music, and I
Mm,
can get into it. I mean, I've gotten into it in my shop where I have classical music on, and I'm doing some woodworking. I'm cutting something, painting, I don't know, making noise. But in the background, I've got Perotti singing, and there are certain arias that I catch that, and the next thing I know, I'm standing in front of that little FM radio and turning the volume up, and I'm trying to do, I don't know what, but it, that's it. I got to stop.
yeah.
It's amazing because I think what it is that I leave my menace behind, the ego behind. I just don't, I forget about it. It's not there. I mean, it's not present, I should say. It's there, but it's not present when I'm listening to that. And it's not me listening, it's just listening.
Ah, that's it. And that listening is what Chip was saying before, is really that attention.
Yep.
It's just being so fully present with presence in the moment, that the listening is not just with the ears,
Oh,
it's with the whole being.
You have someone raising their hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you can't see, I know, but they
Yeah.
have a hand raised, so they should unmute.
Oh, yes, please.
Hello.
Yeah. Whoever's raising your hand, just unmute, please.
Sorry, it's just, it's labeled Zoom user, so no name.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay, well, if you unmute, then please feel free to ask a question. Yes, so listening with full being attention. There's no room for me.
You know, I think the question of listening to music, I'm wondering if it doesn't have a complication in it.
What do you mean?
Well, isn't most music, and I'm not a musicologist by any means, but isn't most music doesn't it stir the emotions when one listens to it? I mean, I can't listen. I can't listen to Pavarotti or Corelli or Madame Butterfly, Maria Callas, without immediately identifying with the emotions that the song is stirring. And that becomes, I would think, a challenge to leave those feelings behind. So I'm just wondering about that.
I think that what you're saying, Paul, is right. But I think it's after you've listened. But while you're listening, I don't think I can describe anything. It's just like you're in it, and you're not. The thinking process stops. So I wouldn't be able to define what kind of emotion it is. It's only after I stop. I'll stop listening, and then the audio is over and so on and so forth. And I'll go and I'll shake my head and I'm like, God damn, that guy's got a voice. Son of a, and I'll just stop, because then I'll go over it. Now I'm reviewing it. Now I've got the ego playing. Now I've got the me reviewing what I did. So that's when that comes in. But I think in the moment, when I'm listening to it, I don't think that's there. I don't think I can maybe some body chills or something like that, but I don't think there's anything mental to it. It's beyond that. I can't explain it.
Well, you're a better man than I am, Ugo, because
I'll take that.
when I listen to Maria Callas sing
All right.
Madame Butterfly, as
Yeah.
soon as she hits the first note, I'm dissolved in a puddle of tears.
Yeah, Paul, the dissolve part is interesting, because it's the thing I think that we're working with here is the relinquishment of the identification with the egoic self, right?
Right.
Right.
So the only time you have an egoic self is when you're basically, what's the word? Supporting that egoic self. So there's you, the egoic self, and other. So the emotion or feeling or thought, those things in and of themselves are not the problem. The problem is we're viewing it through a third party, which is this egoic self, which doesn't really even exist. So we can have, these experiences in, like, let's forget music. Let's look at a sunset or something, or a land, something like that, right? These things are opportunities for us to release this perpetuation of the egoic self. Once the egoic self is no longer vibrating, it doesn't exist. In other words, once we're not aware of the egoic self, there is no egoic self. So when you're in that sunset and you're just looking at that and you're looking at that beautiful nature or whatever, you're not thinking, oh, here I Paul am looking at the sun. It's just you in that nature or art or whatever it is,
Yeah.
So the emotional part, like, however, if you're with music, if you're reverberating, let's say it's something that's stirring your emotions, whatever it is, and you're thinking, I, Paul, like this, well, then, yes, you're right. Then you're having an egoic experience. But what I'm talking about is when you've forgotten ego. That's the kind of experience that I'm talking about. Like people like sexual ecstasy. I mean, all these different kinds of things where you're so engrossed and so entranced in that experience that a separate self no longer exists.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think, like with the example that you gave of the sunset, if there's no movement of thought,
Mhm.
then certainly then the egoic self is not there. It's with the movement of thought, I think, that the observing ego pops up and makes comparisons. But in that
Mhm.
moment, if there's no movement of thought, then yes, you're one with, there's no barrier between you and the appearance. Karen, did you want to say something?
No.
Is that Karen?
No.
Someone
it's
has their
Rita,
hand up?
Rita.
Rita,
Rita, unmute.
I think she's saying she can't unmute.
Oh, you can't unmute? Let me see if I can. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, wait a minute. Oh, it doesn't, I don't see a mute button here, do you? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wait. Oh, no. I'm sorry. It doesn't. It's so interesting. I don't see a mute. Oh, wait. Isn't this, here we go.
asked,
Rita, can you, it says you should ask to unmute. I don't understand how this works. It's usually it just goes right off. Right, Paul?
yeah, it's not going on.
I'm sorry, Rita. Do you see the mute button on your computer, on your Zoom? Can you unmute it? No. I'm sorry about that. I cannot understand why it's not.
Hey, Paul,
Yeah,
just to get back with the no movement of thought thing.
yeah,
Nisargadatta is talking about experiences where he's having movements of thought, but those movements of thought are taking place without an egoic self, his egoic self being triggered or being created. So it's not movement of thought in and of itself. It's when the egoic self is activated. So I think there's two things. One is no movement of thought. And I agree with you about that. That's true. Then you'll experience the self. But another thing is within the realm of creation, like Nisargadatta was talking about. He's talking about within the realm of creation where there is movement of thought, but he's not activating an egoic self. And since he's not activating an egoic self, he doesn't experience it as a separate thing,
yes, yeah. So that that goes back to the two kinds of mind we often
Right.
speak about, right?
That's
And if
that's-
there's thought that's used as a pointer of intelligence,
Right.
and thought that's used to perpetuate the me, that perpetuates the me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, usually when I'm looking at the sunset, after a split second, I'm comparing it to the one I saw in Hawaii, and so that's that's the egoic flow
Right.
of thought.
Right.
But
Right. So
yeah, but looking at a sunset, there's no there would be no thought related, no non-egoic thought, because what would you think about a sunset?
You mean in the moment?
In the moment, yes.
In that moment,
What is there to
there's
think?
just a direct
Voiceless awareness.
a
Yeah.
choiceless awareness, right?
See, I think that's one of the problems. You're having a direct experience of the thing, you know, and you can't call it direct beingness because you're not that thing, but it's a direct experience of it. You're experiencing being there now kind of thing, you know, be here now kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, you know, it seems that that's what beauty does. Beauty, I think beauty and spaciousness and openness beauty points you to that. Not a beauty that we judge or that we evaluate or that we compare, not beauty that we that's coming from a me that's evaluating, but beauty, pure beauty that is that's not different than goodness or wholeness or just beauty, or the beauty of a person, not necessarily the physical beauty, but the qualities, beautiful qualities in a person. When we come across that, or when we meet that, it points us back to our own fundamental being, which is beauty. Because there can be no separation between that which is absolute consciousness, existence, bliss. There can be no separation between that and beauty. That is beauty. So whether it's a sunset, or it's music, or art, or a puppy, or a really beautiful person, that lights up the beauty in us. It's a pointer back to us. And in that moment, there is no me. Now, Ugo, as you said, a second later or 2 seconds later, it can happen that suddenly the mind starts going and the thoughts start evaluating or judging or comparing, and we're out of it. Now we've separated ourselves from that which is not separate. And I think that's probably what most of us are conditioned to do without even being aware that we're doing it.
Well, that's how we're conditioned. I mean, it's a pleasant experience or it's a great experience, and you want to do it again. You want more of it. You want pleasure. I mean, that's what drives a great deal of
That's
I mean, most of our life is seeking pleasure, seeking satisfying desires, and avoiding pain or avoiding let's say, bad situations.
right.
But there's another aspect to this thing that I think is interesting to me, and that is when you're in that moment where the ego is not interfering with what's going on, where you're seeing, you're actually seeing without the ego, and so on and so forth, and there's no sense of anything. That more or less confirms this idea of behind all of this, what you are, this present awareness, because you can get to a point where you can understand you are without the ego. You're still there.
Yes.
So to me, that's a confirmation. That's why I think this stuff is absolute. I mean, I can prove it to myself. I can see
Yes.
it. I mean, you know, I'm using the brain, of course, which is kind of messed up, but that's the only tool we got to use. But I think that really nails it for me.
Yes, yes. That's so true. So a thought can come. So what you're saying is that that awareness, that presence, that background is always there before the thought appears, during the thought appearing, and when the thought leaves. You, pure awareness, are there, always there.
So Evelyn, I'm able to mute
Good.
Good.
because I'm on my computer
Yes.
instead of my iPhone.
Okay.
So I just want to hello from California,
Oh, hello.
and the sound is crazy, but whatever. So this morning, I woke up with a lot of anxiety, and I just closed my eyes, and I just witnessed it. I was just focusing on the anxiety, just not saying, go away, I don't want it, and it helped.
Yes.
It disappeared. Then it came back, and I did the same thing. So it was a process.
Yes.
And I was going to ask you if you could go over the thumb and the other part of the,
Yes.
and I will unmute.
Okay, sure, Rita, yes. Okay. Here it is. Okay, look, he says, my thumb touches my forefinger. Both touch and are touched. When my attention is on the thumb is the feeler and the forefinger the self. Shift the focus of attention and the relationship is reversed. I find that somehow by shifting the focus of attention, I become the very thing I look at and experience the kind of consciousness it has. I become the inner witness of the thing. I call this capacity of entering other focal points of consciousness love. You may give it any name you like. Love says, I am everything. Wisdom says, I am nothing. Between the two, my life flows.
Ugo, I'd like to just say one other thing because I think you were right on target with it. I think you were saying something, and I'm probably going to mess this up a little bit now. I'm a little not quite sure how to say it, but I think you were saying something about where you recognize that your awareness exists even when your notion of an egoic self doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's so fucking profound. Excuse my cursing, guys. But that's so awesome.
Yeah.
Because that's it. That's the whole thing right there. And the recognition that this activation of an egoic self is entirely within our purview. We don't have to activate this egoic self. And one of the things we're working on, I think, in this process is learning how not to activate the egoic self. Or when it is activated, just to recognize, look, that's not who I am. To be able to say I'm not that egoic self is one of the most liberating, profound thoughts that we've been given in these non-dual teachings, I think.
Mhm.
And it gives us an opportunity to practice that. And I think it's so awesome that you said that, because I think it's really the crux of of sort of expanded experience of life, you know. So thank you for mentioning that. That was really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, it gives you, to me, it gives you the power. It gives me the power. I mean, I don't have to go around looking at everything else outside the world, blaring everything outside of me. For me, I got the power. I made myself. I'm the only one that can unmake it. You know, I put this ego together. It's taken a long time to do it. And, with the help of the group, the help of reading and so on and so forth, you can start the process of deconstructing it in a way that, I don't know, to me, it's mind blowing.
Right. You've made yourself with a small s, right? And you're in
Yep.
the process of deconstructing the self with a small s.
Yep.
But the self with the big S, you didn't make.
No,
And that's who we are.
that's it.
And
You got
that's the thing which is never born and never dies.
Yeah.
Right.
So there were two, right, exactly. So that's very cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Well, that's the disidentification. If we can witness and see the ego arising and refuse it, you've disidentified.
Right.
And, right? That's the moment by moment looking and choiceless awareness.
But you see, you can't refuse it. And you can't deactivate it. You can see it. Awareness shines the light on it. And the seeing of it is the doing of it. The
Mhm.
seeing of it is the releasing of it.
Mhm.
Because otherwise you're back to the me
Yeah.
doing and creating.
Mhm.
And it may seem like it's not, but it is. That's why it's so essential just to shine that spotlight of awareness. And it's like Rita said, when you maybe best to even shine spotlight is the focus, the attention. Once you see the ego starting to move, and you'll see it, you'll feel it in your body, because anxiety usually you can feel it in the stomach, you can feel it in the head. There's an awareness of anxiety moving. And if the attention is focused, the energy, it's like a beam of energy focused on that, but silently, in silence, because there cannot be any movement of thought at that moment. In silence, that beam of energy, right on that anxiety, it stops, it dissipates. Now, as she said, it could come back again. Of course it comes back again. And then you just, again. See, that's what puts a pin in it. And the image. That also puts a pin automatically in the image, because that's fundamentally what this me is, this egoic self is. It's an image that was created, and that I don't know that we created it, we may have created it based on life experience. Because oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to respond to what Paul was saying before about music. So when I hear certain arias sung by Pavarotti, I'm just like, oh my God, there's no, oh my God, what a voice. It's just, I am literally in it, even though I'm close to tears. but I'm not having any judgment. I just wanted to pass it.
Mhm.
Right.
You know, I do computer software.
Yes.
I design computer software. And one of the things about a computer, you know, is it can do lots of different things. And it appears kind of miraculous the way they work now. I mean, look at all this stuff that we're doing with computers. But basically what's happening is, in the most simplistic way of saying it, it's executing one instruction at a time. Now, there are variations of this, but just for this conversation, let's just look at it that way. So when I'm talking about deactivating it, what I'm talking about is taking the CPU and not running that program anymore. So I agree with what you're saying, Evelyn, about it being an aspect of awareness, but it is also an aspect of choice. And the example of that is sometimes I'll get into an argument with my girlfriend and she's caught me on something between my egoic self and the truth. And initially I'll try to argue for my egoic self. You know, I have all sorts of reasons why I was right and why I should have done this and et cetera, et cetera. And at this, sometimes it actually becomes so funny because it's apparent to both of us that my egoic self is totally wrong in this case, but I'm trying to stand up for my egoic self. So I have at that point, I think Bill's smiling, okay? So I can see many of us have had these kinds of experiences. Bernie's nodding her head. Okay, so right. So we've had those kinds of experiences. So in that moment, I have a choice to sort of go with the truth or go with my ego, right? And sometimes, like I said, it's so funny that I'm just busted and I can't go with the ego anymore. It's just totally busted. It's not right. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about deactivating. I'm choosing to recognize that I really want the truth. I want the real thing, you know. And so I guess that's kind of, and you're right, it totally comes out of awareness. But it comes out of awareness, but there is also a choice. There's a choice to activate that process. So I'm not running that egoic program any longer. I'm allowing the self with a capital S to run the mindset, to run the mind.
So then the question is, who's making the choice? What is it that's making the choice? Is it the ego then that made the choice, I'm not going to keep this going? Or was there really no choice? And it was awareness, witnessing what was going on. And once it's seen, it's dropped. Once it's seen, it's over. So I think this me is so subtle. That's why it's so difficult to really free oneself as the person of the person, as Nisargadatta is saying, pointing to. However, when there is full presence, if one is fully present in the moment, there is a seeing, there is a witnessing of what is moving. And that's what does it. That's what stops the action. There is no me at that moment. I just, it's Krishnamurti's voice. The seeing is the doing. I think that's so important and so profound. Because then in that present moment, there is no me.
So I have an answer to your, whether it's the ego or it's the self that's choosing. It's always the self that's choosing. The self could be choosing under the illusion that it's the ego, but it's always the self. There is only the self.
That's right,
The ego is an illusion.
right, right.
So it's always the self. But the problem is we get into this hypnotic state where we think we're an egoic self. And that's not real, and that's not true.
Well, yes, because there's identification with this false self, this
Right.
false me.
Yeah.
There is identification with it.
Right.
And we are so strongly identified with it that
It's an image, so you can argue that it doesn't really exist.
yeah, by definition,
yeah,
an image
yeah.
doesn't exist.
Other than in my memories, but that's what I take myself to.
Right.
So when I'm arguing, like Chip says, with my girlfriend, and I see myself being stubborn, let's say, whatever Chip, you're
Mhm.
right.
Right.
I see myself being stubborn. So I'm acting from this image that I have of needing to be right.
Yes.
I'm stubbornly holding on to my image that I need to be right. And so how are we parsing this out? That at some point, awareness becomes a clarity of awareness dawns that evaporates the image and the needing to be right.
Yes, it puts
Yes.
a pin in it. It puts a pin in it. And that's why, if we're talking about practice, that's the practice, is watching the mind, watching the feelings, watching what's going on in the body, watching, listening to the chatter. And we become really good at it then. And so it's not something that, wow, what are you talking about? No, we know what we're talking about because we're doing it, especially in difficult moments. Obviously, when you're watching a sunset or listening to music, to beauty, and it's pointing to the ultimate in you, that's what you are at that moment. But in difficult moments, that's when the watching, the witnessing takes hold. That's the practice. So that, yes, we become really good at it. And we're able to put a pin in it in that moment and it dissolves because it is only an image and it isn't real.
But it's interesting because in a lot of the writings that we've done about relationships, you know, we've kind of juxtaposed, what's happening here?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Juxtaposed having a relationship from your,
Uh-oh. Okay, wait, we'll get back. We'll get back. I think. Go ahead, Polly. I think you can still,
Can everybody still hear us?
We can hear you.
Good.
yeah. Okay.
So juxtaposing having a relationship based on your ego self or coming from your best self, your higher self. And so, or your spiritual self. This is for an audience, of course, that isn't steeped in the kind of non-duality that we've been reading about for a long time. And so we said that by practicing witnessing, you can use the everyday moments that happen between you and your partner, especially the difficult moments,
Yes.
to rise above your selfish self, your ego, and express your best self. So if I'm being stubborn and bullying and needing to be right, and my witnessing capacity kicks in, by virtue of that awareness, my higher self kind of steps in and has a more less selfish reaction. I see myself as being stubborn and bullying, and I shift to a more compassionate, caring place. But you're saying, Evelyn, that we really don't need the category of a higher self or a best self. All you need is to have a witnessing awareness. And in that witnessing awareness, your egoic self is vaporized.
That witnessing awareness is a reflection of the
Yeah.
self with a capital S. That witnessing awareness is a reflection of the absolute.
Yes, thank you for saying that, because I was confused for a second. I was thinking that, well, wait a second, isn't the higher self just another label that's made by the ego?
Right.
Just calling itself the higher self?
That's right. That's right. The ego can call itself the higher self. And, you know, the mind splits. There's the me, and then there's the higher self, which is still part of this me. But with awareness, witnessing consciousness, witnessing awareness, non-conceptual witnessing awareness. There's no me in that.
It's perfect, because even the noticing of the ego labeling the ego as the higher self is also the ego labeling that.
Right. Right.
Well,
Yeah,
maybe we
yes.
leave it there, or what? One more line, Evelyn?
Oh,
What do you
no,
think?
I was looking for this one sentence from Nisargadatta. The body defines the outer self, consciousness the inner, and in pure awareness, the supreme is contacted. There it is, right? There. Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Yes,
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. very
yeah, have a
much.
great
You too.
weekend, everybody. Stay well.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.